Hey, this is Harold Goldberg from the New York Video Game Critics Circle, and this is our Playing with Purpose podcast. I'm the president of the organization and games critic for the New York Times. And today we have kind of part two of a series that's kind of uh, deeper as far as arts go, and both feature one of our members from PopMatters, Luis Aguasvivas. And if you go back to the previous podcast, it's all about 1,000 Times Resist, and it gets pretty deep as far as arts go. This is a different a podcast that talks about playing games when you're deathly sick. So it's going to be deep, but I think we're going to find some interesting things to take away from it. Just a little housekeeping before we start again. We want you to come to the New York Game Awards. We really want you to come because we have such a good time with the community. And so that is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025 at SVA Theater. And you can get tickets on Eventbrite. And we have our legend winner ready, and we'll announce that soon. It may be our most excellent awards yet, just because of what we have in store for you creatively. And be sure to follow NYVGCC on Twitter and Instagram. And don't forget to like and share us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are listening. And if you want to support our work, which is with underserved and unhoused students in the New York City area, go to nygamecritics.com/donate. So today we have from PopMatters, one of our more compelling critics. His name is Luis Aguasvivas, and we're talking about a story Luis wrote for Unwinnable, which is founded some years ago by former Circle member Stu Horvath. What Luis has written resonates with me. It's probably, if not my favorite, one of my favorite stories of the year. At Unwinnable, it's called Baroque Pathology, Monkeys Shampooing While I Slowly Die and Play Final Fantasy VIII. So I think this is a story not only about games, but about life and living life and maybe losing some life as well. Luis, can you tell me how you came to be living in Africa and when that was?
Yeah, well, thank you, Harold. Yeah, I'm glad that the story resonated with. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. If you resonated with the story, it probably means that you've gone through things. So it's that. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Benin, West Africa, which was a former French colony. I think some people might know Benin as Dahomey. It was known as the Kingdom of Dahomey, and then it went from a weird period where it was a Marxist-Leninist state for a while, and then it became a democratic country in the 90s for a while. And it's recently changed. It has an autocratic leader now, which actually that election happened during the time that I was in Benin. So that was definitely it was definitely a politically trying times for the country. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the early 2010s there, working as a school teacher. For those that don't know, the Peace Corps it's a U.S. Foreign policy initiative founded by John F. Kennedy, who put on a Sergeant Slaughter initially at the very. He was like in charge of that, which you use like you take U.S. professionals or recent grads who have like a specific know-how and essentially extend, I guess, like a goodwill effort. You're there for typically it's about 2 years. I know it changes depending on country. I mean, a lot of times it becomes difficult because some of the countries there might be natural disasters or political like instability, and one might leave or one gets sick. Like in the case like what happened to me in Benin, so I got pretty sick and I had to be evacuated from the country, which is partly like at the heart of that story.
So, Luis, when you're assigned this 2 year stint, which is essentially about giving back, do you stay in one country aside from this kind of, if you're particularly sick or something like that, or do they move you around at all?
So you typically, well, I can speak more on like the modern structure of it.
Yeah.
But typically you stay in one place. A lot of it just has to do with community need. So you're assigned with one community. So essentially communities, they, I guess for lack of a better, they petition essentially for specific aid, or there might be specific needs that they might have. So they'll petition, and they try to assign somebody that meets that need. So it can be somebody helping when it comes to like economic development, or maybe like a extra like health care worker to like work in their. In my position, it was more to do with like with education and helping be not only a school teacher, but then also helping with like school like administrative and like and grant and funding for their schools. Now I was assigned to a fairly rural place in Benin.
Can you describe it a little bit? Describe your first day? If you remember.
Yeah, I mean, the first day, essentially, you arrive there, and it's fairly. I mean, it's a mix of like a lot of stuff because it's fairly like idyllic. You're there, and it's like everybody is. It's very like humble, like village life. Everybody's for the most part excited to see you, and you feel that enthusiasm. But for many people who do this type of work, depending on where you're sent, it can be such a huge, not only culture shock, but then also just a huge difference when it comes to just like how you're living. Even though Peace Corps volunteers don't necessarily make a lot of money, you're still very much well off compared to everybody else. Not just because of the stipend they give you, but then also you just have links to the U.S. You have like the U.S. government backing behind you. So if something does happen, you have that. Behind you. So there's still that separation there. So it is like an odd experience. Being there, and describing. So I was in the village of Mitro, and in the valley of Weme, which is essentially eastern, like southeastern Benin, which pretty close to the border of Nigeria. It's very tropical, extremely humid. It's very beautiful. So you would have to like descend down essentially into the valley, and it was always makes for like quite a sight when one would see that in the palm trees and everything. They're like the fauna and the flora was definitely something that always like just always like captivated me.
What sort of animals would you see there?
You see a lot of. I mean, you see a lot of things there. I mean, a lot of different types of birds. I guess more if I'm gonna speak more directly to my story. There's a lot of There's a lot of monkeys there as well, very mischievous monkeys that steal your stuff if you aren't careful about it. So and being an American and somebody from that's used to like a specific like way of living, you try to take certain things, not a lot, but what you can that you're not really gonna find like in Benin. So I've had like some shampoo that I really liked that I that my mother packed for me and everything, which that was it. I'm like, I have enough for the 2 years, which was like two decent sized bottles. And well, I had some friends, some mammal friends across, that lived like by across the river that had like different ideas of how long that was gonna last. So
that is beautiful. And we're going to take a quick break, but the first thing I want to know is the gist of the story is playing a game when you got sick. So how did you bring a game console with you when you packed stuff up, or how did you get to a game?
so I had a computer, I had a laptop, which I would use. I was fairly fortunate where we had access to electricity in my village. It wasn't 24/7, but it was there, like enough where I can work like a few hours, give or take. And depending on the season too, you might have almost 20 to 18 hours of electricity. So I just had a few games on Steam that were already like pre-downloaded. Um, and on occasion, I mean, I wasn't really playing a lot of games specifically like when I was working, but there was a point when I did become ill, obviously, where there was not much that I can do, which I was like trying to recover, and I leaned on that because it was hard for me to like focus on a book specifically or anything else. A game really like requires a lot of like captivates your attention in a lot of ways, where at least like even if it's like for 10 or 15 minutes, I can like really be like really engrossed in it and like forget like everything
How sick you are.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
and that was like a huge that was like a huge like relief like for me like during like the time. I mean, I had like I wish I enjoyed the game a little bit more, but
Yeah. Well, we're
helped.
gonna get right into that after we have a short break and talk about playing Final Fantasy VIII when you're not feeling well at all. We'll see you in a minute.
The Playing with Purpose podcast is brought to you by the New York Video Game Critics Circle. The New York Video Game Critics Circle is a nonprofit organization that brings comprehensive games journalism and games narrative classes direct to schools in underserved communities across New York City. Students are given unique opportunities like writing game reviews for NYGameCritics.com, creating games with Twine, and conducting interviews with gamers and game industry icons, like this very episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to go to nygamecritics.com to learn more. And head on over to nygamecritics.com/donate to donate to this incredible cause. And now, back to the show.
So we're back with Luis Aguasvivas. He's been telling us about his journey with the Peace Corps to Africa and talking about what he had done in the realm of education in Africa. And he had downloaded some games on Steam, including Final Fantasy VIII. But then you became ill. So what happened? How did you get sick?
I mean, it's not really clear. I mean, it's not uncommon for one to become sick. Not only there, not it's just it's an environment where You don't necessarily have access to like clean water like all the time. There's no, a lot of the amenities that like we're used to here in the United States and we take for granted. That's not necessary how it happens. I just do remember shortly of that I started. I don't know how graphic it can, because this is obvious. This could border on like body horror and stuff on here. So I don't want to.
You could go for it. Caitlin can. If we need to edit it out, we will.
Okay.
But
I mean, it's not necessarily. Yeah, it's just like I just got like a sore like inside of like my mouth, like underneath like my lips, like where my teeth were, and I noticed that, and I was like, and I've never gotten anything like that before. I didn't know like what it was. It was definitely very uncomfortable, and just slowly though, it wasn't healing. Instead, it was like growing, and just from my own like training and experience too, because I was born in the Dominican Republic, which is also like a tropical environment. So you know about like infectious diseases and things like that and how humidity makes that work. Like immediately I was like, okay, this is not good. So when I tried to get like some medication, it didn't get any better and essentially just keep getting worse and worse. And I was like losing a lot of weight, like a lot of weight as a result. I couldn't really eat because it hurt so much. And just through time, it just started like it just started deteriorating. And obviously, when you're in situations like that, you try to find like, as part of the healing process, it's important to find like do things that essentially take you out mentally of that experience. I mean, for example, a lot of the medications that people take when, especially like painkillers or situations like things like that, it's like, it's not necessarily that they're healing you. It's just the painkiller, taking the painkillers helps one essentially not focus on the pain and then being able to do things like eating, etc., that otherwise would be very difficult. And that helps with the healing process. So on top of like the medication that was prescribed to me, I was also trying to find like things to like pass the time. Because I was growing like very like weak and frail, and hence what I thought about, it's like, oh, you start thinking about in like, I guess like in a feeble, pathetic state, you start thinking about like things of your childhood, things that like you're like fond of, and I always remembered playing Japanese like role playing games, like have like for a lot of people like my generation have definitely, they captivated us a specific way, telling like these like grand narratives that like you can get lost in. And I tried to play some games that I've never like really finished or just like vaguely remembered, and Final Fantasy VIII was definitely one that I've had a pretty memorable first impression of, which I discussed in the article, which back when I was living in the Dominican Republic, there were two young boys who were playing it at a video cafe, and I was just walking that day like around the neighborhood, and I just saw that. I've never seen anything like that for a lot of people, right? Like that 1999, like the graphics, the opening cinematics, like the mix between like music and the visuals, like it just seemed like the future, especially coming from a place where we don't have like ready access to like electricity or anything. You're seeing like something like that like being on display like on a television. It really seemed it just seemed it was like magic. I know there's a few scholars that really talk about that, where technology, when technology is really like, when it really clicks and it really like makes an impact, it becomes almost like it's hard to distinguish that actually from like our concepts of like magic. Like it's just, and that really felt that way to me. Like, even
I think it's true, Luis. I mean, just as personal historical background, my first story for Wired was about Final Fantasy VII. So I went to Hawaii to meet the FF7 team, including Mr. Sakaguchi.
Oh wow, yeah, the Gooch, big fan of
Yeah,
his. Yeah.
yeah. So they were so proud of what they had done, not only for as an RPG, but for the cinematics. And so I remember sitting with Mr. Sakaguchi. He says, just sit. We just want to show you the opening cinematics. And it really was like magic. I'd never been to Hawaii before. That was a magical experience. And just watching this, and I did not know that sort of graphics could be done on, this was a PlayStation. So I can not only relate to that portion of what you're saying, but also the kind of hallucinations that you experienced while playing. At one point, you say in your story, you were laying on the floor with sweat dripping down my back. I transitioned between hallucinations and playing FF8. And I grew up with Crohn's disease, so I was in and out of the hospital a lot. It's something I still deal with. But, arts kind of got me through, but, popular art. I remember two things, like being in the hospital. One was hearing, I think, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John for the first time on the radio. And so this is a point where, oh, well, you have a 50% chance of living. And so I was just like kind of a mess mentally with the drugs they were giving me. And I heard that song and I said, oh, this sounds a little like John Lennon, but it just kind of took me just the melody and the lyrics took me kind of elsewhere. So I felt not as if I were on a Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, but just into some kind of in-between space, which is kind of what you described as well. And then I had a tiny little handheld football game that my mom brought me as well, and it was just like LEDs on the screen. And so I would play that, and that too, no graphics or anything, kind of put me into this kind of other space where I was a little more powerful than I was being sick in the bed. So can you describe your experiences with playing and then not feeling well and then playing again?
Yeah, it's especially with a game like Final Fantasy VIII, which already feels very like dreamlike, like in the way that the story's told. It was definitely an odd experience because I would play for a bit. You would get to the cutscene, and the cutscenes would already be. I remember there's a very famous cutscene in that game, which leads to a lot of theories amongst fans, which there's an attempt. The party essentially is trying to take out the villain of the game. They don't succeed. They have it's a failed attempt, and then the villain though strikes the main character Squall essentially with a spell that impales him. But then like out of nowhere, like the game is Squall's like back, like in he's in his bed. It seems like he's fine. I guess like a time lapse happened, but the game isn't like very like clear about that. And having like witnessing that like in the game, and then myself playing a bit, and then it's like I like fall asleep or like I'll faint and have like these like fever dreams, and then like I'll wake up, and then like the game's like right next to me and stuff. It really like reinforced like a lot of these things in a real like intimate way. And I mean, ultimately, for the piece for me, it's something where I hope I was successful in this, but I'm not certain. Where it's, how you play anything or just encounter anything for the experience something for the first time, and like your mind frame that you're in, that really, that really marks like how you feel about this thing, and how you, and and going back from being like extremely ill, and play and trying to play this where it's like I'm really like the game is not really like my priority. I'm not really like very present in the moment of playing the game. It really is like a means to an end to me at that point. That really like affected my play experience, and now just generally like what I think about like the game. It's not a game that I feel I could never love it. I mean, I know I do. I do like have like the line where it's like, I hate Final Fantasy VIII. I love Final Fantasy VIII. That's a direct homage though to Percival Everett's book like Erasure, where he has like which even the title of my of this piece, it's like Baroque pathology. He has within Erasure, there's like that book called like my pathology, spelled like with like a F. So I took that from there, and the main character in that book within a book describing his mom, he's like, I loves my mama, I hates my mama, and stuff. So I thought about that with it, which is like this, and that's a book that's also very much like really plays with that like perception of like feeling well or not, or just like these like major like life like traumatic experience and like shocks. um and that was something that I took to heart. I mean, I'm I try to bring a lot of different like experiences, like when it comes to like my writing, not only like personal, but then also just what I learned through life, either through through reading, or just through just like living as well. And I think that's what makes a medium like video games just so like amazing. And we're talking about Final Fantasy VIII and like the just how innovative it was when like it's technology, but we can't forget too that these are human beings that like made this stuff, right? And like they bring in also like their own like perspectives. I know for Final Fantasy VII, for example, I know Sakaguchi, that was around the time that his mother died, and dealing with that, you see that when it comes to like Cloud's own inner like inner turmoil, like later in the game, and other things as well, like throughout that. So um it's amazing. It's amazing that we can have like these like experiences. Like I've never met anyone who worked on this game, right, like personally, but they've essentially like shared something with me that has become, it's always going to be a part of my life.
It sounds cliche, but it is the power of video games. I was a music critic and wrote about film prior to writing about games. And I think the reason I gravitated toward games was that it was a fuller experience of media, right? So you can concentrate, if you like, on narrative, or you can concentrate, if you like, on music. And each game is different for everyone, right? So when we teach our students in our Playing with Purpose classes, we ask them to look at games as kind of an art form. So yes, they can write about gameplay and how that affects the game, but also talk about the narrative and the story, which is like super important to me. And then the music as well. I always I think in a New York Times piece recently, I just took a paragraph to talk about one riff that sounded like Anthony Braxton in a game. And so maybe no one knows about Anthony Braxton. So now you might want to look it up if you see it there. And thankfully they let me keep that in. But Louise, I just want to thank you for taking the time not only to write this story, but to share your thoughts about the making of this story with us. So everyone should go to Unwinnable and check out this story on Final Fantasy VIII. It's actually at nygamecritics.com in our most recent roundup. So you can check out Ronald Gordon's roundup and find Louise's piece there. It just really, the piece really stands out to me as one of the better, if not the best, essay I've written about, or I've seen about games this year. So you can find us, New York, at NYVGCC on Twitter and on Instagram. And we look forward to presenting more of these Playing with Purpose stories to you. I want to thank Louise for taking the time, and we'll see you soon. Buy your New York Game Awards tickets.
Bye.
Bye, Louise.